Life insurance, the entry-level series, the products, the underwriting, and the planning applications to position your practice as the premier provider of insurance products in your community. Get on board, get on track, get to where you're going. And now, your edutrainer, national insurance columnist, Steve Savant.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Savant, your edutrainer and coach for our edutrainment workshops, our entry-level introduction into life insurance. And all this week, we're doing our introduction into index universal life insurance, perhaps the most popular contract and policy out there right now with life insurance. And we're on the Lincoln Benefit Life Eclipse illustration software page where you can download their software. We voted it as such a user-friendly software piece. You can go out to Eclipse illustration software and hit the run installer. That's at www.lblsales.com/ETW. Then you can go page by page with us, and I think you'll find it really helpful for you, and your learning curve will actually accelerate just by walking page by page with us. Also from Lincoln Benefit, who is an Allstate company, they have a great page out here, and it's on the bottom of your screen, the address, and also in our search engine optimization description where you can just cut and paste it in because it's rather long. Here I have a huge list of really good prospecting helps, and my favorite is the Facts of Your Life booklet, which comes either in electronic form or hardbook form, and you can just write me. And at the biz, if you can't figure this out and get here to that, I'm happy to help you out there. And write me at the biz at brokersalliance.com, and I'll send you the actual e-version of that. Now, also out here is the prospecting letters and postcards. Remember, these are already done, ready to go. They'll really be helpful in your marketing campaigns. And the good thing about it is it's already ran through compliance on Allstate. But if you're with FINRA, you're going to still have to have your broker-dealer go ahead and approve these docs. And if you're saying, Steve, I've really missed some of these episodes, you can always go out, no matter if it's the Business Insurance Zone or Welcome to the Weekend with Steve Savant or what we're talking about today, our edutrainment workshops. You can always go to our page, www.brokersalliance.com. Just come to our homepage and click on the on-demand videos, and you can always get caught up. Again, we recommend that you start from the very beginning so that you can really lay the groundwork and understand what we talk about when we're talking about life insurance. Now, I want to go to the whiteboard today, and I'm going to choose black for a little while here. And the first thing I want to talk about is, remember, we've talked about this before, indexed UL, bottom line, is a UL chassis. Now, just like IUL is a UL chassis, so is current company, practice UL, so is VUL, so is guaranteed UL, and of course, all the survivorship contracts that go with that as well. You can get them all on UL, and of course there's whole life, but these are all on the same chassis. Now the reason I bring this up is because IUL actually earns its crediting using indexing or indexes or indices. The most popular out there right now, of course, is the Standard & Poor's 500. We have a lot of access to other domestic indices as well as foreign, but probably the most popular right now is the S&P 500. Now, when I'm looking at indexing, I want to bring up a couple points that are probably really important to bring up from the get-go. Anytime we're using indices like the S&P 500, we do not assign dividends. There are no dividends. So when you're looking at numbers, if you're looking at a chart to prove your point of why indexed UL is so great, and that chart, if it's an S&P chart and it includes dividends, it's kind of misleading. So you really need to think about when you're talking about the S&P, it has no dividends. Now, last week when we talked about variable universal life, that actually does include the dividend, but remember, it doesn't have the downside protection issues. So when you're talking about the S&P 500, there is no dividends assigned to that, and you just want to be fair and explain it in a compliant way so that your client doesn't feel like he was kind of led down another road. Now, when I talk about it, I want to talk about it in a basic way so that you can see what we're talking about. So for example, let's say the carrier in question, I have a company, an insurance company, and let's say their bond portfolio is earning 3%. That means if it's earning 3%, and this is basic concept thinking, it's not actually the actual statistics. Everybody has different ways of crediting and assigning their numbers, but I just wanted to give you a basic. The basic bond portfolio, let's say, is earning 3%. So I could take 97% of my portfolio and it's going to be somewhere a little bit more than that because this isn't quite equal, but I just wanted to keep it basic, so that I can earn back at the end of the year, I can be made 100% back to principal with this 3%. Now, because I freed up some money, and actually it's going to be, like I said, a little below 3%, I'll actually be able to buy options with that 3% that I took out at the beginning of the year. This is going to be credited. My portfolio is going to go back to 100, and that's how we can protect the downside. So I'm using part of my bond portfolio, a very small piece, using that 3%, and again, it's going to be more like 2 point whatever it is, and I'm going to use that as my investing most of the time in call options. Basically, the carrier is always going to be able to protect the downside because they've already elected that they can use this 3% on their total bond portfolio to get back to their original investment, 100%, and that means that you're credited to that. Now, keep in mind that even though in the worst scenario, and let's just talk about that for a second, in 2001, 2002, and 2003, and 2008, these were the worst negative years of the S&P. That means if you took the last decade and you said, I had 4 loser years, I would say I never took, if I was in an index universal life contract, even though these 4 years were loser years, I would have never had any negative taken from my policy based on the earnings. I'm going to get to it where you are going to have a negative. I like this because it really does downside protection with upside potential. So your downside is covered by the tactical use of these options with a very small piece of their bond portfolio. Now, when I look at this, remember, I still have expenses to pay. So even though I was credited, I only had credited 0 in all those bad years, I still have bills to pay. So it is kind of a misnomer to suggest that you'll never lose any money in IUL. You still have bills to pay. They could be admin charges. There could be premium loads. Remember, every carrier is going to be different on this. They could have the cost of insurance, which is the biggest idea. The policy fee. All these are coming out no matter what. In fact, actually, if you took these traditional fees and you were doing an indemnification scenario for death benefit or for coverage, it is possible that all this could be between 300 and 500 basis points, which would convert to anywhere between 3 and 5% loss, compounded, by the way, during 2001 through 2003. And just to give you a heads up, so we would not have, we've only would have credited 0, wouldn't have had any negative, but I still have bills to pay. And I just want to make sure we're all aware that this is a fundamental and we can't duck around it. It's really something that you got to think about. Now, not only that, but let's give another analogy because I think that would really help too. Let's say I wanted to lease a house, see how it was, live in it, and so I'm going to buy a home with a lease option to buy. So I tell the client or I tell the landlord, I'm willing to go ahead and pay, let's just say it's just $2,000 a month. I'm willing to lock in for 12 months, and I'm willing to also give him another $2,000 on top of whatever he asked me for my deposit, first and last month's rent. And the reason I'm willing to do that is because I may or may not buy this house at the end of the 12-month period. So it's an option to buy. Now, at the end of the year, the house actually went up in value in my scenario. So let's say I had a $100,000 home, and my $100,000 home went to $120,000, and it only cost me $2,000 to spend on that. I'm buying this home. It proviso I like the neighborhood, I like the house itself, and so forth. But what happens if the $100,000, the housing market goes down, and now it's worth $80,000? I'm not going to elect to purchase the house because now it's worth less. So at $2,000, my $2,000 is gone. I spent it because I had to give the landlord or the owner of the home the ability to at least see I was serious, and I bought an option. I'm just not going to exercise it. In the year that I don't exercise options for Index Universal Life, I'm going to be credited nothing. And that 3% that I used to spend it is gone. But remember, our portfolio, 97% of our portfolio, 3%, it came all the way back to 100%. So we're golden on that. That money is gone. If the S&P does well, in my housing example here as a kind of a segue analogy, if I have profit, then I get to buy that. and participate in the upside of the S&P. Again, no dividends, but I'd be able to participate in it. So it's a basic idea of using, when I'm explaining this, I like to explain it as a lease with the option to buy. And I think that's something that everybody gets. So basic way I teach this, by metaphor, I use the housing idea. And I think that's really a way to go. Now, when I'm thinking about indexing, 3 things that come to mind. 1, I look at the Monte Carlo. 2, 20-year tranches, and I look at what was the return during that period in time. And during that period in time, I'm looking at about a 5.5% S&P return. Then I look at Index Universal Life was really built to be about 200 basis points above the interest rate. That was what it was built. So in today's market, if my current company assumption UL is crediting 4.75, then I'm going to take the current company interest rate on regular UL and I'm going to add 200 basis points. And in my example, I said if the current market is 4.75, then I'm going to credit 675 on my proposal for the S&P. Now remember, almost all carriers are using their look back. And their look back rate, right now, the ones I've seen are anywhere between 8.3 and 9.1. Those are awful high. What I like to do for the client is to give a basic 3 idea, the look back, which is the most aggressive. I like to show what it was built, the actual IUL was built, indexing was really built to really perform about 200 basis points above the current interest rate market. So I like to show that in my middle ground. And then if I want to be conservative, I look at 5.5%. Now, to be fair, to compare this to whole life dividend returns over the same period in time, they're going to be awful close. Currently, the 5.5 beats almost every whole life illustration I've seen, and there's, even if you use PUA riders and load it up the best you can, pretty much this is still going to win, but not by much. If I granted dividend projections to go back in time, then this is going to be a very big competitive number. So what I'm looking for is I'm trying to give kind of the yin and yang and to kind of give a full due diligence or due care on my proposal system and use the kind of statistics that I know are reasonable. So I'm always going to show the floor at 5.5. I'm going to show the mid rate at 4.75 plus 200 basis points, so it's going to be 6.575. And then I'll still go ahead and use the look back number of the carrier, the look back rate, because if I don't do it, I know my competitors will show it. And all the time, every time I show my illustration, almost every fiduciary, CFO, tax attorney, whatever the employer is looking at, he always appreciates that I've shown all 3. And I promise you, I'll be the only one showing all 3. And I'll have my little bit of executive summary that I'll write for each one to show why I went this way. To me, this is a fair explanation of IUL, a basic entry one.